Some parts of our planet receive so little rain they can only sustain small numbers of specially adapted plants and animals. These are the deserts, and they cover 1/3 of the Earth's landmass. But the deserts are growing at an alarming rate. Overpopulation, overgrazing, and the diversion of rivers are causing once productive topsoil to blow away, creating huge dust storms in urban areas. Deserts occur in rain shadows cast by mountains or in areas where prevailing winds are very dry. Certain plants, animals, and even people have learnt to live in these arid regions. Now, these desert cultures are having to adapt to a new and changing world. In the Kuwaiti desert, the life of the Bedouin is not what it used to be. The Al-Adwani brothers are well-to-do Kuwaitis. They have a family business, but they enjoy camping out in the desert. The family owns a farm in the desert, just a stone's throw from the border with Iraq. At one time, camels were the main source of transportation in the desert. Their milk is considered a powerful elixir by Bedouins. Camel fleece is a strong fibre, and camel meat is expensive and highly prized. Bedouins used to live in the desert, migrating from place to place. All they had were their tents and some cattle they took with them as they moved. Today, most Kuwaitis live in modern houses with air conditioning and modern appliances. But they still prefer the simple way of life, spending days in the desert, milking camels or riding horses. This is how their fathers and grandfathers used to live hundreds of years ago. But life has changed since those times. From their land, they can see Iraqi oil refineries. Large stretches of open country outside Kuwait City are dotted with tents, occupied each weekend by families who prefer wide vistas to a city skyline. The Al-Adwani brothers have families and lead modern city lives, but on weekends and holidays they come here to Abdali to enjoy the life of a Bedouin. The brothers plan to build 6 small farmhouses for their families that will have all modern appliances, air conditioning and hot water. But a tent, covered with carpets and heated with a fire, will always remain a special place for these descendants of ancient nomads. To the west, every winter, another nomad leaves its home on the Iranian-Turkish border in search of a warmer climate. Hundreds of thousands of the greater flamingo species visit saltwater pools in the desert near the Red Sea. Ornithologists say that the flamingo's migration is not yet fully understood. While they are in the area, the large pink birds feed on small fairy shrimps in the shallow pools. They are one of the few widely available sources of food in this arid region. The greater flamingos are found in parts of Africa, South and Southwest Asia and Southern Europe, and usually leave cold Europe in autumn en route for Africa. Flamingos will generally migrate only short distances. However, due to changes in the climate, water levels in their breeding areas, flamingo colonies are moving in unpredictable ways. Populations that breed in high-altitude lakes, which may freeze over in the winter, have always moved to warmer areas for the winter months. But now, with the extra melting of snowpack and glaciers, water levels are rising, and birds are searching for more favourable sites. In other areas, drought conditions are forcing flamingo populations to relocate. Most flamingos that migrate will return to their native colony to breed. However, some may join a neighbouring colony. When flamingos migrate, they do so mainly at night. They prefer to fly with a cloudless sky and favourable tailwinds. They can travel approximately 600 kilometres in one night at about 60 kilometres per hour. When travelling during the day, the flamingos fly at high altitudes, possibly to avoid predation by eagles. Little is known about the breeding habits and migration of these birds because of their after-dark migratory patterns. In addition, their breeding sites are on very saline lakes, remote from human populations, which makes it difficult to study them. The number of birds that migrate to the east or west seems to depend on the direction of the prevailing winds in the bird's first autumn. Flamingos may abandon their nests due to a lack of water. Other desert animals are just as difficult to observe, which is why the government of Sharjah in the United Arab Emirates has established a zoo housing around 45 species native to the Arabian Peninsula. The Nubian ibex is on the endangered list, as are many of the animals being cared for in the Arabian Wildlife Centre. The more than 1,200 residents make this the largest collection of Arabian wildlife anywhere. The AWC and the adjoining breeding centre, where many of the animals have been born, attempts to present the creatures in their native habitat, to give people an appreciation of the richness of the desert environment. Populations of the Hubara bustard have been severely depleted due to hunting. Other rare animals include the Arabian mongoose, various wildcats, and the rock hyrax, a tree-loving animal that looks like a cross between a rabbit and a beaver, but which is actually a distant relative of the elephant. The centre's breeding program is starting to show success, and there are plans to re-establish wild populations of some of the rarer species. The caracal is almost impossible to see in the wild, not because there are very few of them, but because they hide so very well. Their populations range across barren regions of Africa and Asia. In South America, the Atacama Desert is known as the driest area on the surface of the planet. But every 3 or 4 years, when the El Niño effect kicks in with changes in the surface temperatures of the South Pacific, weather patterns around the world change. This can lead to drought in Australia and South Africa, but it also means that rain comes to the Atacama. The plant life in the Atacama, which is adapted to take advantage of good conditions, bursts into flower, and a race to set seed for the next generation of desert plants begins. Seeds that are spread during this brief flowering will lie dormant in the desert dust until the next rain event. The Atacama Desert on the western coast of South America has the lowest precipitation levels in the world. There are sites where there has been no rainfall in recorded history, and erosion occurs primarily from the wind. Such places look like the surface of Mars, and there is almost no trace of life. Seeds and bulbs here may have to wait as much as 30 years for their chance to reproduce. When enough rain comes, they germinate, grow rapidly, and the desert turns into a garden. Flowers bloom, seeds form and spread. Then everything dies and awaits the next opportunity after 1, 5, or 30 years. Species often flower in sequence, so that sometimes a valley will be purple one day, yellow 2 weeks later, and blue after that. In places, a carpet of colour covers soil which appeared to be lifeless just a few weeks before. The finest manifestation of what is called the Desierto Florida occurs in northern Chile, between the cities of La Serena and Copiap. There were excellent flowering displays in 1991 and again in 1997. In China, deserts are spreading rapidly, creating a massive ecological nightmare. Here in Beijing, sandstorms are becoming commonplace, with the desert creeping forward at a rate of more than 10 metres every year. Scientists estimate that 250 million people worldwide are directly affected by encroaching deserts. Minqing County was once a lush oasis along the ancient Silk Road. Now it is one of China's driest regions, 96% of it desert. Each year, two huge deserts, the Tenggar and Badinjara, edge closer, trying to converge, threatening to swallow up Minqing forever. Farmers spend 2 months of the year planting shrubs and laying straw in a bid to hold back the shifting sands and preserve their way of life. The straw is to stabilise the dunes and to give some nutrition to the barren sand, so it can support plant life to consolidate the process. Already 30,000 farmers have left their homes to be resettled elsewhere, 10% of the 300,000 population. And Minqing is not the only area affected. The Taklamakan Desert in China's far west is also growing at an alarming rate. Amin Barat, a 49-year-old farmer who lives on the southern edge of the Taklamakan, has moved 3 times because of the growing desert. He has to work regularly to keep back the advancing sand. He says the desert grows 3 metres every year, and it's getting closer and closer to his house in Yumingahon village. Since the 1950s, the sand has swallowed almost 5 million hectares of cultivated land, making China one of the countries most severely affected by desertification. But here too there is a program to establish green barriers to stop the spread of the desert. These are drought-resistant plants, but they still need some water. They have only a tenuous grip, and changes to the climate are making it more difficult for this and other desert reclamation projects to succeed. If the climate continues to warm, China and the rest of North Asia will be blinded by more frequent and more extreme sandstorms. Back in Minqing, a green wall of defence stretches over 340 kilometres, but at times it seems a battle against impossible odds. These saplings are still vulnerable to prolonged dry spells. Carting water to keep new growth alive has been used, but it is expensive, and even then water supplies are limited. But China is able to marshal large numbers of people to make these desert reclamation projects happen on a large scale. With adequate rainfall, the plants will grow more rapidly, but without rain, the deserts will continue to grow. China now has 1.57 million square kilometres of desertified regions, an area 3 times the size of France. But not everyone is pessimistic. The director of Xinjiang Institute of Ecology, Sung Yudong, says that as long as China follows scientific guidelines and continues to invest in large-scale projects, it should be possible to control the spread of the deserts. Another project near Beijing used thousands of volunteer workers to plant trees in an effort to surround the capital with a gigantic green belt. Human encroachment, especially overgrazing, driven by the economic needs of a huge population, has led to this very serious problem. But the planting of trees in areas suffering from water shortages is not the only answer to China's problems. Tree planting has to be sustainable in the long term. Further north, on China's border, Mongolia is also suffering. Here, nomadic herdsmen used to roam widely, but with modern life, these patterns of migration have become more limited. The traditional nomadic grazing pattern gave the grasslands time to recover, as tribes and herds moved on to new pastures once the grazing ran out. Now, nomadic traditions are no longer followed. Families tend to settle in one place and enclose their animals in fenced pastures, which quickly tires out the grass, as it no longer has a seasonal break to rejuvenate. This new migration complicates the whole desertification situation in the country, as overgrazing on these new pastures speeds up erosion and brings the desert one step closer to the city. Also, the industrial boom in the cities has caused some herders to move closer to the capital, Ulaanbaatar, in an attempt to share in the increasing prosperity. The Mongolian government is also funding desert reclamation projects to hold back the advance of the Gobi Desert. Here, summer temperatures can reach 40 degrees Celsius, while in winter it can plunge as low as 40 below zero. Almost 75% of Mongolia has been affected by desertification, and when the northerly winds start to blow, thousands of tons of topsoil are lost to dust storms that are felt as far away as Beijing and Tokyo. In the cities, it becomes difficult to breathe, and traffic has to slow down. In Mongolia, over the last 15 years, the number of livestock that the country supports has grown by 40%. Traditional herders are being encouraged to switch to the growing of fruit trees in order to conserve the fragile land. On the northern fringes of the Sahara, the world's biggest desert, thousands of nomads gathered recently to revive the festival of Tantan in Morocco. It is an immense assembly of all the neighbouring nomadic tribes from this northern part of the Sahara. With strong support from the Moroccan authorities and King Mohammed VI, the festival was able to take place after a significant interruption of 30 years. Traditionally, the famous Tantan Muasem was held every year and was an impressive social and cultural gathering of thousands of nomads from all the main tribes. It is held in honour of Sidi Muhammad Mahel Anin, the most famous and widely known chief of the nomads who had close links to the King of Morocco. There are craft demonstrations using leather, wood, silver, copper, and goat and camel hair. There are also cooking displays using traditional ingredients. Originally, these were spontaneous and regular meetings of the tribe's people. Tuareg tribesmen put on displays of horsemanship, and there are both horse and camel races. The Muasem celebrations feature musical performances, popular chanting, poetry contests, and other Hassani oral traditions. The first Tantan Muasem in 1963 was associated with Muhammad Lagdaf, who resisted the Franco-Spanish occupation. He died in 1960, and his tomb lies near the town. For more than 20 years, political instability in the area meant the traditional desert festival was abandoned. But because the Muasem provides a valuable opportunity for horse and camel breeding and any number of cultural exchanges, it was in everybody's interest that the meeting be revived. The new version of the Muasem takes place in September. Today, the nomadic populations are particularly concerned to protect their way of life, their desert skills and traditions. These gatherings are an opportunity to meet, to buy, sell and exchange foodstuffs and other products, to organise camel and horse competitions, to celebrate weddings and to consult herbalists. Economic and technical upheavals which have affected the region have profoundly altered the lifestyle of these nomadic communities. These days, modern technology makes arid areas more accessible, and various deserts around the world have become venues for endurance events, like the Sand Marathon, a 6-day foot race from Urs to Kermou on the edge of the Sahara. It is regarded as the toughest race of its type. During 7 days, men and women from 36 countries cover a total of 224 kilometres in very difficult conditions. The terrain varies from year to year, but generally covers rocky plains, lake beds, sand dunes, and occasionally runs through small villages. The most recent race had a field of 757 competitors. There were 2 checkpoints where runners were given a bottle of water. Because of the harsh conditions, each person has to carry an obligatory survival kit containing sleeping bag, compass, food and water. Brothers Mohammed and Lassen Hansel from Morocco were fastest on day 1. Back in the Atacama Desert in Chile, a combination of dry air and high altitude make it the ideal location for astronomical observation. A European consortium has established a complex of different telescopes known as the Paranal Observatory at an altitude of 2,600 metres. There are 4 large diameter telescopes and 4 smaller ones which glide on tracks. Images from the smaller telescopes can be combined to produce additional detail using a technique called interferometry. Until this complex was founded, it was thought that the best astronomical images could only come from an instrument orbiting above the distorting effects of the Earth's atmosphere. However, the very low levels of humidity that exist year-round in the Atacama Desert, combined with the technical sophistication of the new observatory, mean the pictures of space delivered by the Paranal telescopes are superior to anything previously seen. The larger telescopes have reflecting mirrors 8.2 metres in diameter. It's not just the desert aspect of the observatory's location that is special, but being in the Earth's southern hemisphere, it has a view of the southern constellations that are not visible from European and American telescopes. Astronomers from around the world are coming to the Atacama to use the new instruments, and other space researchers are using the Atacama's unique environment to develop robots for use on the surface of Mars. Because of its extremely low organic content, the Atacama Desert is serving as the testing ground for systems designed to search for even the simplest of life forms. The robot called Hyperion will eventually be able to test materials on and under the surface of the ground to look for both water and living organisms on the red planet. Hyperion is one of a series of robots that will go to the Atacama Desert as scientists perfect its design, software and investigative abilities. The final version of the next generation Mars robot will need to survive the 160 million kilometre trip to Mars and travel autonomously to conduct tests of the Martian soil. So NASA scientists thought the Atacama Desert was a good place to start.